that this princess or priestess, it could have been one or the other or both, wanted people to see her profile and see that she was regal in the fact that she had an elongated skull. Also, what's intriguing is that the hair is red, or has a very strong reddish tinge to it. And so what we're hoping to do is to take samples from this skull of the hair and the skin and have it sent to Lloyd Pye in the United States, who is the keeper of the Star Child skull. And he's very eager to find out for us and for himself what the ancestry of this woman was. Is this a completely human being, or is this possibly a hybrid human being?
Now, I've heard of red-haired giants in America.
Yeah.
Can you relate that to this? I mean, do those stories perhaps both talk about the same being?
Well, the thing is that the people here, according to Senior Juan, were 1.6 meters, so that doesn't make them very tall.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. But the red hair is interesting because that's the Inca were supposed to have red hair. Okay, these may be the ancestors of the Inca.
So the Incas may be directly descended from these people. These beings.
As in Easter Island, as in the seafarers and all that.
Yeah. Okay, let's try that again. Let's just relate that part. Like, what's the relationship between? What does the hair tell us?
Okay. The intriguing thing about the fact that she has reddish colored hair, of course, most people will say it was sun bleached, or because it has been in the ground for 3,000 years or longer, that it was originally black and now is red. But what we can do is, if we take samples of the hair and the skin, and we send it to the United States to be analyzed by electron microscopy. If we take samples of the skin and the hair and send it to the United States and have it analyzed through electron microscope and also by DNA analysis, then we can find out about the roots of the hair. If the roots themselves are red, then that shows that this person was red-haired. And what's intriguing about that is the fact that it's said in the chronicles that the Inca had red hair.
Today, scientists are analyzing material from America's most intriguing archaeological site, the Windover Bog in Florida. This rare material holds vital clues to the origins of native North Americans, and the scientists are on the brink of an incredible discovery. Yet the story of the unearthing of the Windover site itself is just as remarkable as anything they found buried within it. Cape Canaveral, southern Florida, 220 square miles of undisturbed marshland on the outskirts of the shuttle launch site. In January 1982, this landscape was to change forever. The remote district of Windover would be the site of 50 luxury homes. To prepare the road leading to the Windover housing project, construction worker Steve Vanderjack needed to clear a path through a marshy area known as the Windover Bog. Before long, something unusual caught his eye. It looked like a rock.
The first one that came out, when I threw it off to the side to dump it out, I saw it roll off from the pile a little bit, and I found it a little strange because you don't see a lot of rocks and stones here coming out. So I jumped off to take a look to see what it was that I did pick up out of there. And as I turned it around, it was looking at me. And that's when we stopped.
In the bucket of his backhoe, Steve Vanderjack had found human remains, a skull. Vanderjack thought he'd stumbled upon evidence of murder.
Maybe some foul play, maybe an accident, maybe somebody stumbled off in there, you don't know.
News of the discovery traveled fast, and chief developer Jim Swan rushed to the site.
Well, there's a flurry of excitement. They called me down, and I went down, and they had a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket with this skull looking up at me that they had recovered out here on the site. I'm no expert in that stuff, but it was so beautiful and old. The tannin had gone into the skull, and it was a gorgeous color of shiny brown, so I didn't think there was anything new about it.
Jim Swan's instincts told him this was no modern burial and could be of enormous archaeological significance. Where there was one skull, there could be many. Jim Swan suspected they were onto something big. He summoned the help of anthropologist Glenn Doran, then a young assistant professor at Florida State University, and an expert on human bog remains. Within weeks of the remarkable discovery of the skull, Glenn Doran arrived in Windover to examine the bog. He was intrigued by what he saw.
There was a relatively small, little nasty water black pond, and at first glance it didn't look like a particularly inviting place for an archaeological site. But then we got out and we started walking up and down and looking at the piles of peat, and within just a few minutes we started seeing clusters of human skeletal material.
Immediately, Glenn Doran found clues to the age of the site in the skull's recently exposed teeth. Modern teeth are smooth and intact. Ancient ones worn down. The dramatic wear on these teeth told Glenn Doran the Windover site was older than anyone imagined.
You could look at the teeth and instantly see that no, this was not a crime scene, this was not a forensic case. It was clearly somebody who had lived, thousands of years ago.
Most human remains found in Florida are less than 500 years old. Glenn Doran's big challenge was to study the bog's hidden clues to figure out exactly how much older the Windover bones could be.
There were a couple of things that were immediately obvious and interesting. One is the skeletal material was extremely well preserved. Secondly, when you looked in the peat itself, you didn't see any ceramic material. And ceramics to us are an indication of materials of the last, say, 4,000 years. But the fact that there wasn't any ceramic material in there was really the first hint that this material could be quite old.
Glenn Doran suspected the remains could date as far back as 1,500 BC, to around the same time as King Tutankhamun in Egypt. But to be certain, he needed to send a sample of Windover bone to be radiocarbon dated.
So we took some of the bone samples, sent them off to the lab, and then it was a waiting game. And then finally we got the word back that the materials were over 7,000 years old. I mean, we were really walking on clouds. I mean, it just unbelievable. It exceeded our expectation. We knew we had this just incredible once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Glenn Doran had stumbled on the exceptionally rare remains of ancient Americans. So rare that the 5 skulls and 3 bones he'd found were already the largest human collection of this age in America.
It really gives us the most vivid picture of prehistoric life you can possibly imagine. It gives us more information to get really right down to the nitty-gritty of everyday life, of health, of sickness, the human tragedy of injury and disease. What was it really like to be alive in Florida 7,000+ years ago?
The Windover bones belong to people who lived over 3,000 years before the first pyramids were built in Egypt, and almost 6,000 years before the birth of Christ. They were some of the very first people to set foot in the Americas. By 1986, over 10,000 bones and hundreds of artifacts had been painstakingly excavated from the Windover bog. Dr. Joe Lorenz of the Coriell Institute in Camden, New Jersey, is performing brand new analysis of the brain DNA, using techniques no one had access to back in the 1980s. Lorenz is re-examining sections of DNA called haplogroups in the brains of 5 Windover people. He's looking for haplogroups found only in native North Americans, because finding them would corroborate all previous work.
When I sequenced larger fragments and I was looking for the sites that I know are characteristic of Native American haplogroups, I was surprised because I did not find them.
In contrast to all previous findings, Lorenz couldn't confirm the Windover people were Americans. Further investigation revealed something even more remarkable.
I went back to the screen and I looked at the sequences again. The first person's DNA, it looked European. When I looked at the second one, it looked European. When I looked at the third, fourth, and fifth, they were slightly different from the first two, but they looked European.
Lorenz had found DNA unlike any other from Native Americans. Most scientists believe that some 15,000 years ago, people walked from Asia across the landmass now covered by the Bering Straits into North America. Lorenz's results could be consistent with a new and controversial theory that proposes some of the earliest people migrated to America from Europe, perhaps by crossing an Atlantic Ocean significantly narrower than it is today.
If our genetic analysis shows that these individuals really do belong to a new and previously unidentified lineage, founding lineage in the New World, it would be very big news.
So the race is on to find the final proof. But for the moment, Lorenz's work has added to the mounting evidence of an early European migration and stirred the controversy over the most extraordinary journey in human history.
When Europeans first set foot on what is now Paris Island in Beaufort, it was more than a half-century before the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock and 44 years before the English founded Jamestown. Just beyond the present-day Marine Corps golf course on Paris Island is the site of an early fort established by the French in 1562. The site also contains a number of forts built by the Spanish. Since 1979, South Carolina archaeologists have excavated at the site of the French-built Charles Fort and the Spanish settlement of Santa Elena.
When we excavate at Santa Elena Charles Fort site, we find really wonderful things because there's nothing that's been built on top of it that has destroyed it to the extent that most other sites of the period have been damaged by later construction. So right now, Santa Elena Charles Fort is underneath a golf course.
Since the excavations began, the U.S. Marine Corps has helped archaeologists explore the site. They've even moved part of the golf course and are working on ways to stop tidal erosion of the site.
So what we have here is some of the earliest evidence of European occupation in the southeast. And there's so much of this that can still tell us about what it was like to come to the New World, what it was like to begin the colonies here. We've only excavated roughly 3% of this, so there's a lot of information here. But we also want to preserve it for the future. I mean, we have a lot of research questions that are being asked, and that's some of the active archaeological work that's going on in coordination with the preservation work that's going on. But by and large, our goal is to just preserve it for the future.
From its beginnings, archaeology has sought to answer one fundamental question. When did human civilization begin? Where is the origin of our current way of life? And for a long time, the archaeological community agreed that there were only 6 societies in the entire world that were capable of generating civilizations in antiquity: Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, China, Mesoamerica, and Peru, and believed that the youngest settlements located in the Americas. However, one discovery would change this theory for all time. The city of Caral, capital of one of the world's oldest civilizations, lies in the Supe River Valley, located between the Andes and the Pacific Ocean, and only 182 kilometers from the city of Lima. Ruth Shadi, a Peruvian archaeologist, came to this place in 1994, and there she made one of the most important archaeological discoveries in history.
This city was previously designed. Its construction was planned, and this shows us that there was a social hierarchy and a government, as well as an organized labor force. This is something that is demonstrated throughout the entire work, and is so well highlighted that visitors can actually see it. 5,000 years ago, when the Sumerian cities in Mesopotamia, or the pyramids in Giza, in Egypt were being built, here, urban centers like this one at Caral, which would have been one of the most important, were being constructed in this valley and others in the north-central region of Peru. This changes all our known history, because Caral now becomes the main culture, which Julio Cetello had already identified some decades before in Chavín de Huántar. Now, we know that Chavín de Huántar was a continuation of a much older cultural tradition. It is enough to visit Caral to have an idea of what the cultural process was that 4,400 years later gave rise to the Inca Empire.
Peruvian archaeologists announced the discovery of 2 religious temples dating back over 3,000 years. They are located in Lambayaqui, and it is believed they belong to a civilization living on Peru's northern coast. The Coyut Sarpan complex consists of a series of buildings and was part of the capital of this ancient civilization.
It's made up of a series of buildings for religious use that during its time would have been the greatest religious capital of all of Lambayaqui, and perhaps of the entire north, because there is no other temple of these dimensions anywhere in the north.
A staircase was found.
It's an impressive construction technique. As you can see, this is 3,500 years old, and it isn't even cracked. It's an architectural technique that has an extraordinary design, and it would be interesting to study the temple from a structural point of view.
Local authorities say there is evidence to suggest there is much more to be discovered in the area that dates back to earlier civilization.
spiritually, but we've had no reports, so we assume they weren't successful. Meanwhile, a mummy 3 times older than King Tut has been discovered in the Nevada desert. It was found in 1940, about 12 miles east of the town of Fallon. It's a discovery that could possibly unlock some of humankind's early mysteries. But tonight on Special Assignment, Channel 3's Vince Sturla tells us scientists may never get a chance to unlock those mysteries.
The excavation with your arms, your shoulders.
Outside of Fallon, Nevada, the curious have come to learn more about an ancient society of people who once called this cave home.
They discovered that the cave was underwater when it was formed 20,000 years ago until 7,000 years ago.
Not far from this cave, a mummy has been discovered. A mummy that may reveal the secrets of an even older society, one that dates back to the dawn of civilization.
This is extremely significant. This is unprecedented. We haven't had a find of this importance in my lifetime.
One thing that makes the mummy, known as the Spirit Caveman, so important are these fine hand-woven fabrics discovered at the burial site.
These textiles represent an extremely sophisticated ability to weave fabric by hand in a time where we didn't realize that people were doing that before.
The mummy was discovered tightly bound up in this matting. Out of respect for the dead, this photograph and this drawing are the only 2 pictures scientists will allow to be publicly displayed. Recent tests reveal that the mummy is 9,000 years old. That's 3 times older than any other mummy yet discovered in North America. That news has stunned archaeologists because a mummy can tell scientists how people back then lived, what diseases they had, even what food they ate. Scientists can get that information by studying the mummy's DNA. That requires cutting a small piece of tissue from the body.
That it shouldn't be done.
And that, says Paiute Shoshone tribal leader Alvin Moyles, is desecrating the dead. In Moyles' case, maybe even a dead relative. So in your mind, this is an ancestor.
That is true.
The mummy was discovered near Paiute Shoshone land. Moyles believes the mummy's spiritual journey has been disturbed and that the spirit cannot find peace until the body has been properly reburied.
You are bothering the spirit. They're not to be bothered. They're put to rest, and that's where they should be left.
But scientists claim that the mummy is so old that he couldn't possibly be related to the Paiute Shoshones, that the mummy's tribe was here thousands and thousands of years before anybody else.
They do not appear similar to any living Native American in North America. They have receding cheekbones, narrow face, long face. Some Indians have some of those traits, but as a group, those are Caucasoid traits.
The 2 sides are now caught in a catch-22. One way to prove kinship is through the DNA test, but the tribe doesn't want that because it would require further disturbance of the remains.
I don't believe that the society today, majority of the people that have people buried in your culture would like to have your grandparents dug up because some scientist wants to come through and study it.
Whether or not scientists ever get to study the mummy is a matter for the U.S. government's Bureau of Land Management to decide.
The DNA evidence would be definitive for ruling out certain groups. You can't necessarily prove with it which group it was, but you can rule out contending parties.
Until a decision can be made, the mysterious Spirit Cave mummy will remain trapped in limbo.
Yeah, he's kind of in the legal, spiritual, ethical limbo.
In Carson City, Nevada, Vince Sturla, Channel 3 reports.
Even mummies can't avoid the law and bureaucracy, it appears. Many archaeologists agree it's entirely possible the mummy is not related to any existing tribe in North America.
Yeah, it sounds like the mummy predated most of the Indian tribes from that part of the country.